All right, hi everyone. I'm Jim Little here, current woofer at Rob and Michelle's farm with Verge Permaculture, and I'm going to be talking to Mitch, who is a current woofer and current intern actually with Verge. So before finding, this is Mitch. So before finding Verge, how did your background lead you to discovering permaculture concepts?
First time I heard about permaculture was in my undergrad through talking about what we had been talking about, how we were presented with a lot of problems in the world, but very little solutions.
Right.
So I've been and a lot of my friends were in geography as well, so we're all just kind of depressed. Like, how the heck are we supposed to do anything about this? And permaculture just kind of kept coming up in conversations with my peers.
Okay.
Not from any professors.
Right.
Which was a shame. And that always just kind of put it on the back burner. And it was like, well, okay, this is really cool. And kind of encapsulates everything that I'm learning about. And then when I finished my degree, I went to work for Parks Canada.
Okay.
And I was out in Lake Louise for a little bit, and I was cleaning toilets, and I was like, this isn't exactly what I want to be doing.
Right.
And
they weren't compost toilets, were they?
No, they definitely weren't. Definitely not. And then went over to New Zealand and did my master's in applied meteorology, and specifically frost prediction. But through that as an avenue of study made me appreciate more what the weather is and these kind of micro scale interactions. And the whole time with permaculture in the back, I'm like, okay, how can I apply this to other things?
Okay.
And give me a very broad understanding of, well, one, how stochastic the world is. We're just a speck of dust flying through space.
Right.
And the weather is just the manifestation of that and interactions with the sun on different surfaces.
Okay.
Which is crazy. And then COVID brought me home from New Zealand.
Right.
And I guess backtrack a little bit. Before in January of this year, I was back in New Zealand, and all of the smoke from the Australia bushfires was coming over.
That's
and
right.
Just like,
the forgotten story of 2020, the Australian fires. Yeah.
And I was reading a lot of headlines, and having that climatological background was like, oh God, this is... It just, another wave of that kind of eco-depression kind of came over me.
Right.
I was like, I can't just let myself succumb to this anymore. So I, luckily one of my friends, probably the one who introduced me to permaculture in the first place, like, oh, you should listen to this podcast.
Oh, okay.
And it was a podcast with Rob, and I was listening, it's like, wow, this guy's got my dream job. I've got to talk to him.
Right.
So that basically, and so facto just kind of brought me here.
Okay. So your exposure to permaculture was more or less self-taught just by looking into it on your own?
Yeah. So, and one of my good friends, Tom in New Zealand, he actually had a copy of the first edition of Bill Mollison's textbook.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So he lent that to me.
Nice.
And that man was so smart. Like, the climate section in there is better than any sort of climate textbook that I had.
Incredible, yeah.
And any geography textbook that I had.
Yeah.
In like the 7 years I was in the academic institution, which is mind-boggling.
You're right.
Yeah.
That's cool. So you have been woofing for roughly the last month or so.
Yep.
With a trip back to Calgary here and there. Had you done any woofing or work on farms before?
Yep. So when I was on Vancouver Island, I had volunteered at a farm just right outside of the city called New Mountain Farm.
Okay.
And it was just a volunteer basis, and I'd go there maybe twice a week, and I'd just come home with tomatoes and lettuce and whatnot. So.
And was it woofing officially? Or was it just
no, it wasn't officially woofing. I was just volunteering, and it was an organic farm, very small.
Okay.
But it was just
same premise as woofing.
Yeah, same premise.
Yeah. Okay. So, you got into touch with Rob, and is that, I understand that's what led you to woofing here.
Yep.
How did that process work?
Well, the first thing I did after listening to this podcast where Rob was being interviewed was I booked a consultation with him.
Ah.
So I figured it wasn't he wasn't going to want to talk to some, recent graduate who's like, oh, what do I do with my life?
Right. You were valuing his time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And he's obviously incredibly busy. So I was like, okay, if I want to actually get this guy's attention and actually have a conversation with him, I'm going to need to pay for it. Mm-hmm. So I did, and it was fantastic. I just like opened my eyes to a lot of things. And at this point in my life, I was also considering going back to schoal, going to engineering school.
Oh, wow.
Because I was wanting to apply permaculture principles to civil engineering on a very large scale.
I see. Oh, yes.
And during this conversation, Robbie's like, you don't need to go back to school. Don't go back to school. Please don't go back to school.
Right.
And he gave me a bunch of books to read and whatnot.
Okay.
Like a list of books. And I was like, wow, okay, cool. And he told me that the squeaky wheel gets the grease. So be a squeaky wheel.
Right.
So I basically just didn't leave him alone.
Okay.
And then once I had settled back in Calgary after going across the world with COVID and everything, I just emailed him and asked him if he knew of any volunteer opportunities. And he just said, yeah, come up to the farm.
Nice.
So here I am.
And that's awesome. And I believe since that time and since COVID started, they've more formally become woofing hosts. So you can actually find them on the website, as far as I know. So that's another way of connecting.
Yeah.
In my case, I was taking the PDC and I wanted some hands-on, so that's how I found them. But I guess the takeaway there is that Rob and Michelle are both very engaging and willing to help, but they're also looking for people who are committed and ready to do this kind of thing. So,
and like wanting to learn, because there's so much to learn. I learned so much in my first week.
Okay. Well, that was going to be my next question. Is what are some of the insights that you've taken away from this, and or lessons or surprises?
Well, I mean, it's not all peaches and cream. You're gonna have to put in the work.
Yeah.
The first 3 weeks was digging trenches.
Right.
But it was so cool to dig a trench that was eventually gonna. I don't know if you can see the solar array back there, but basically, have the electrical wires that carry the electricity for a solar array.
Yeah.
And that's just incredibly rewarding.
That's funny because the first hour I was here, I was welcomed to this beautiful meal, and then I got some blisters on the shovel filling in that very same trench. So I never actually thought of that, how the woofers are connected in time like that too. Yeah,
absolutely. But it's also just applying permaculture principles and working smart, not hard.
Exactly.
And incorporating that into everything that you do.
Exactly, yeah.
Is both possible and incredibly important.
That's pretty cool. And how do you see permaculture integrating both into your own life going forward and more on the global scope of climatology in general?
So my own life going forward, I'm just hoping that what I have dedicated my time to is worthwhile, and not only will I learn what permaculture principles can bring to the world, but what I can bring to permaculture, I guess, in some manner.
Right.
Because in school I was just learning about hydrology, geomorphology, climatology, all these earthologies, basically.
Right. Yeah.
And it was basically just siloed permaculture.
Yeah.
But it was this is this, this is that, this is this, this is this.
Without connecting.
And it's okay, so I want to connect it, and this is such a means to be able to do that. And what I'm hoping to do is be able to eventually disseminate that knowledge, and get people out of their silos, and embrace. I always say it's just set sail to the stochastic winds of the universe.
There you go.
Because there's no fighting Mother Nature.
That's right. She always wins.
Yep.
Yeah, that's interesting. Everyone has needs and yields, right? So everyone brings something special to permaculture, and everyone gets something special out of it, I think. So that's cool. And so your permaculture education this far has been kind of informal, but also very hands-on here. Do you have any aspirations of doing the formal PDC with Verge Permaculture?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm PDC-less at the moment. But I would, obviously it's something that I need to do, and I'm just going to gain so many insights on how to get out of those silos, because I'm sure they're still quite ingrained in my head, and I haven't explored all of the connections quite yet. So I'm very excited to get into the PDC and just explore.
That's cool. Well, I highly recommend it to you, and I think permaculture would be happy to have you, and I think you've got a bright future ahead with you. So
Thanks, man.
I'm glad you found it.
Yeah, me too.
All
Because
right.
I mean, yeah, solastalgia, the eco depression, is so real, and there's no room there. I mean, it's understandable that it happens, but there's not really room for it because it weighs you down. And
Right.
when you are thinking about this all day, every day, and it's just like interrupting your everyday interactions with anyone,
Yeah,
and one that's really sad, but it also limits your creative thinking.
that's true too.
So it's just like when you can give yourself hope, you can give others hope.
That's
and
right.
That's the most important part.
Yeah, and when you find permaculture, you find people that you can vent to, but then also look at those
Yeah,
solutions.
they get it.
Yeah, and like get on with the solutions,
Yeah.
and have gratitude for being able to pick a basket of berries and enjoy beautiful, healthy meals. So
Yeah.
it's awesome. Well, I think we have a couple meals left together before we
Oh,
part
at least
ways,
a couple.
But I'm sure we'll cross paths again. So
Yeah.
Any other last thoughts or?
No, just embrace the stochastic winds of the universe. Have fun, and don't get yourself down because you can make a change.
Right on. Okay, Mitch, that was great.
Cheers.
Cheers.